It's a wonderful day in real estate, a snowy day here in the city of Chicago. And I have I'm going to call it an old time buddy of mine today. I have known Steve now, I want to say for 20 years. I was a baby in the
Yes,
world of real estate.
for sure.
Steve, thank you for joining me this morning. How are you doing?
First of all, thank you for having me. I'm doing great. Thanks.
I,
I'm
I
doing great.
and I am elated to hear that you're doing great now. I've known you for 20 years. I've known you as an entrepreneur. You've owned multiple businesses. What do you want to tell my Facebook audience about you? What do you feel is and I don't want the most recent accomplishment, but what's one of your greatest contributions, I guess, to the world outside of your potential
To
wife
the
and
world.
children? Yeah.
Well, again, thank you for having me. Contributions to the world. I guess my book, The Titan, that I wrote in 2012 is probably the greatest contribution because the chapters in the book were designed to be a navigational system for entrepreneurs and high achievers in business to navigate through tough times, get introspective, and really dig into their own story so that they could use their story of the past as a navigational system for the future. And there is a set of principles in there that I live by currently that all came into my life at different times, and then I kind of played with the sequence time, put it into the form of a fictitious little tale where a guy gets thrown back into 1947 Chicago and discovers his entrepreneurial DNA, I would say, meets the members of his family that were influential in his development. And it's a cute little tale, and it's got a bunch of messages in there to help entrepreneurs navigate through life. And the reviews that I got in 2012, 13, 14 were so overwhelming. This tiny little 75-page book had what appears to be a tremendous impact on a lot of people's lives. So I would say besides my wife and kids, that's my greatest contribution.
So I want to go back maybe about 20 years ago. I met you 20 years ago. I
Sure.
think at the time you might have had a yellow Porsche. And I've done business with you through multiple businesses. And so
Yep.
I've done business with you in your first business and when everything was going great in the world of real estate. And we were out here on the South Side flipping a boatload of houses. And then I did business with your company again during the downfall of the real estate business. So I've seen you essentially reinvent yourself, understanding where the market is going and what's needed in that market. Where do you get your entrepreneurial keen insight from? How are you able to know what tools are you using? Were you born an entrepreneur? Like I was born an entrepreneur. So when people ask me questions about Marky, how do like I kind of get mad at the question I just asked you when they say, well, Marky, how do you know this? And I'm like, man, I watch the market. Like I read studies, like I kind of know what's getting ready to happen. How did you come about the different businesses that you've been in? Is there a resource or were you bred to
Hmm.
understand market conditions?
Well, thank you for a great question. And that yellow car was a Toyota. I'll get clear on that. That was an MR2 Spider. Yep. Um, that was my first midlife crisis, I think.
Like a Porsche, you do know
It,
that,
it,
right?
it did. Well, that's why I bought it, because I was able to get it cheap enough and have it look like a Porsche. Actually, to answer your questions, um, I have dug deep into my past, way, way back into my past, to my earliest experiences as an entrepreneur, and I use this story in several keynote speeches that I've done over time. But when I was 8 years old, I borrowed $1 from my father, and I rode my bicycle a mile across the town of Skokie, Illinois. And I went to a little dime store and I bought 98 pieces of penny candy. And the reason I bought 98 pieces of penny candy was because tax was 2 cents. So, and I had $1. So I had to pay 2 cents tax. And I rode my bicycle back with 98 pieces of penny candy. I laid them out on a picnic table in my neighborhood and I sold them for 2 cents a piece to the kids that weren't old enough to ride what I call that profitable mile yet. And then I went back and bought twice as much candy and did it again and again. And I was in business at 8 years old. And at about 13 years old, I went to work in a hot dog stand, and I quickly discovered I didn't like working for anybody else. I didn't like paychecks. I liked my freedom. I liked to have my own vision and my own hours. So I guess I identified like super early that I was an entrepreneur. That took me out to Arizona, where I went to school, and I started a business hustling watches and rings at a flea market. And then when I came back to Chicago, just by one lucky phone call changed my life. I wound up becoming a trader at the Chicago Board of Trade. You probably don't even know that side of the story. That was my first career. And I had an amazing 19-year career as a bond trader at the Chicago Board of Trade, starting at 22 years old. And then at 40 years old, technology took over my world very quickly. And the human factor, the crazy guys jumping up and down in the trading pits, weren't needed anymore. Computers took over. And I wound up getting involved in a family business, which was Lemons-Ryhal Financial, which was a consumer finance company at the time that my brother and I took over. It was experiencing some really serious difficulty. Our father was the owner, and my brother and I took over the business in the year 2000 and transformed it into one of the earliest fix and flip lending businesses on the map, actually. We kind of wrote the playbook for the whole fix and flip lending business that you see out there now. And, we didn't have a customer base. So we would come into the office at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, open up the Tribune and the Sun-Times and look in the classifieds for people that were buying or selling real estate, circle the names and cold call them and try to meet them at McDonald's on 87th and Western, or somewhere in Bronzeville, or somewhere on the West Side. And I found your name in Hyde Park, and I came out and met you in Hyde Park. I discovered you. I don't care what anybody else says. I discovered you as a very young lady. Yep. Circling a name in the Tribune or the Sun-Times.
It was the Sun-Times because I was running an ad in the back of the Sun-Times.
Yep.
You've never told me this story. And I will say this. I understand that businesses come and they go. And one thing I will say is that I was successful in the purchase rehab business because of you. My cousin and I, Mike Cathy, he's a chartered financial analyst and a graduate of Booth. We wanted you to get our money. We had money with you, and we also had money at the time with Shore Bank. And you enabled us to be able to buy, renovate, and sell 7 houses here on the south side of Chicago. I don't even know if people who come into the business today, they don't understand the history of the business. They don't understand how our relationships are, that these aren't new relationships, that some of us have done a lot of business together, and it could be 3-4 decades, So you got to be real careful because this real estate world is small, but keep going. I never knew that.
Government. Yeah, I remember perfectly coming out to Hyde Park, meeting you on either 51st Street.
It was 51st.
Yeah, at a little shopping center. We met at a real estate / mortgage office. I'm sorry, my home phone is ringing.
Not a problem. That was Bill Harris's office. It was the Hyde Park Mortgage Company.
Yes.
Now there's a high-rise building standing there. And I think we either met in the office or went next door to the Pancake House, which now has moved to 47th Street.
But we met in the office, and I laid out the program that we had available. And I remember your eyes like turned into flying saucers, and you said, "Whoa, this could work for me."
It did.
And the rest was history. And I will tell you that, you started off as a contact out of the newspaper, but quickly turned into a relationship, a very treasured relationship for the rest of, the next 20 years up to this date. I mean,
I never knew that. Well, you've done a great job at facilitating relationships. Wow. And then I went on to turn a lot of people on to you because at the time I was a I was in residential loan origination,
Yes.
transitioning to get my broker's license and then to go to the real estate side of the business. And so you were a go-to resource for numerous projects. But then I'm thinking about the relationships that I have as a result, like Tony DeSano, right? I met him through you. We still inbox one another on occasion, and
Yep.
some other people. So wow. But I know, so we've all
Tony DeSano was my brother's best friend growing up. Tony was working for his father in the drapery business, vertical blind and drapery business. And I said to my brother, this kid's way too talented for that. We need him. We're going to bring him into this business, and we're going to find a spot for him. He started out as our director of marketing and then became one of our top producers. And I remember literally handing Tony your name and said, this is a diamond. You treat diamonds very carefully, and you never lose track of where they are, because they're very, very, very expensive. And
wow.
I feel that way. I've been able to reach out to you over the years, whether it's been in the rehab lending business or when we started our security company, Dogs, to secure vacant and abandoned buildings on the south side and the west side and around the city, for that matter. You were one of the first people that I reached out to ask you what you thought about it, and and you've always been gracious and incredibly responsive, just incredibly responsive.
Well, you know what? Now, so here's the thing. I want everybody on Facebook to know, you never know how people come to find you, because this is the first time I'm hearing this story. And when I call myself being fortunate. I'm like, oh, this is a great product. I can buy rehab. I think the first house we did with you guys was 5713 South Loomis. It was a bungalow.
Oh, wow.
And then Tony was so responsive, especially when you all would come do these fear reviews. I needed to make sure that the property was right so I could get my next draw of money right. So it's amazing. But then the real estate market took a turn, and we ended up with a bunch of foreclosures and short sales. So when you came out with Dogs, it was what was also needed, because you were coming in, I think, were you the second entry into the market in that type of system?
We were.
And we needed to secure these properties. And I got a crazy story to tell, and I didn't use your system on this property.
What?
Let me just tell you the story. So we put a secure system on a property over at 5821 South Perry. And we didn't put anything on the basement because there was nothing in the basement, and they didn't have a door to fit the basement door. Somebody came into the basement, they pried the floor joist apart, and they put a makeshift ladder to come up through the floor. So when I walk into the house one day with the little key code, right, there were people with a mattress laid up in the house that I had been born and raised in, that I was doing a gut rehab. You could have bought me. You see, you didn't want me to tell this story about you. It was not your system. It was somebody else.
Okay, good news. Just want to say the name of the company. No, I'm just kidding.
The other company, start with a V, right? And so when I walked up in there, I'm like, how the hell did y'all get up in my house? And at the time, my husband was my boyfriend. And he just said, Marky, turn around slowly. You're not going to believe this. And it was a couple laid up in my with a mattress, right? Because they had pried the floor joist apart. Right. And so that was an innovative system. Now, with business, we definitely have our, peaks and your valleys, right?
Yes, we do.
And we have a lot of stress. So when you came out with a book, and now you have a private Facebook group, and I asked you a couple of questions. Tell people what the group is, and what is the concept behind the group, the pillars.
Well, thank you again for asking. The name of the group is Hour of Champions, HOUR, of Champions. And the group is designed for people that are looking to connect and build inner strength to be able to deal with fear, stress, stuff that causes anxiety and depression. And nobody is immune to that. And I found that out very painfully in the year 2009 when the crisis hit, and I had to painfully unwind the magnificent lending business that I had built with my brother and a team of incredibly young people. And it was the most painful, stressful time of my life. And there's another story behind it, and that's for another day. But as I navigated my way through life and the bumps and bruises that came with the stress, the anxiety, I knew that in order to be able to deal with this, I was going to have to put myself back together in a incredible physical, spiritual, and mental condition. And I started working out like crazy in the middle of the night, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. I started incorporating mental toughness and spirituality into my phone. I would find YouTube videos or interviews, and I would listen to them while I worked out. And I found a way to incorporate physical fitness, mental toughness, and spirituality into the beginning hour of every day. And I coined it the Hour of Champions. And when I put myself back together, I was pretty proud. And I knew that if I was experiencing this, that there were tens of millions of people that were experiencing this. And people get afraid. They don't know where to go, where to turn to, who to talk to. They wind up in therapy. They wind up on medication. And I just found a better route through life. And I coined it the Hour of Champions. And I decided a year ago, last summer, to start a Facebook group so that I can get my message out there. And I started with 2 people, started posting the workouts that I was doing and sharing with people how I would find spirituality and mental toughness and get it into my phone and listen to it while I worked out. And the group just started growing. People started listening to my, YouTube, my live videos and reading the posts. And one person would invite another, who invited another. And as of this morning, we're at close to 1,300 people. And I wake up and I go, this is my brain working. Why isn't it 130,000? Why is it moving so slow? Because I come from the world of instant gratification, fortunately. But I've taken a step back. I'm proud of what we've accomplished, and it will grow because it's something out there that everybody experiences, and they don't have a place to turn. So I would hope that anybody listening would join our Facebook group called Hour of Champions and learn more, especially if you're struggling.
Now, you know what? And here's the thing. A lot of times we suffer in silence. So as I tell people, I am elated to have my mind, because my loss in the real estate business actually started in 2006 with the death of my grandfather. Then I had my 3rd bout of pneumonia. Then my mother died. Then I got married, and my family jokes, but they said that my husband was striking while the irons were hot, because I don't know what the word was. I was just disconnected. I was very much loving my children, but I was mentally disconnected from everything. So when the real estate I was a high-risk pregnancy. I fainted on an airplane, and the doctor basically told me I had a choice. Either I could slow down or I could risk losing my unborn child, which is my youngest son. And at that point, I decided to slow down, and I really didn't care if I lost everything. So as a result, I lost everything. I lost everything financially. Let's go that route. And through it all I knew was, Marky, keep on smiling. My mother, upon her death, always told me to have the faith of a mustard seed. And I was born and raised in church. So, I went back to faith and started reading books, kind of like what you were doing, but I didn't call it a Hour of Champions. And it took a long time. It wasn't until 2012, 2013 that I even mentally understood everything that I had been going through essentially for 5 years. But it wasn't something that I publicly talked about. I put my smiley face on every single day, and I hit the streets. And what was funny was I actually went to go see a psychiatrist at the University of Chicago. And he told me that I wasn't depressed. He said, you know what? He said, people who are depressed have no dreams, no goals, and no ambition. He said, you still have dreams and goals. He says, I believe that you've experienced a tremendous amount of loss and that you need a grief counseling group. He says, but I can't help you.
What a hero. What a true hero.
So I walk out, and now I'm talking to myself. I'm like, Well, so you got to, like you don't even know how to digest that, right?
Yeah.
He like, look here, yeah, you've been through something, but I'm not gonna help you. And
Right.
so, at that point, I was when your money started looking funny, a lot of us start doing a lot of things that we're not supposed to do
Yeah.
because we're trying to replace the money. And I tell everybody the book, The One Thing by Gary Keller, changed my life. And I live by that quote, be like a postage stamp, stick to one thing until you get there. We often allow our time to be divided, therefore putting ourselves in a worse situation.
Well stated.
You know,
I will tell you to simplify what you just said, if you'll allow me to.
hmm
I too experienced what I didn't know the difference between life events and mental illness.
hmm,
And I had a life event. I lost a business, and I too went to a therapist who treated me for mental illness. I didn't have mental illness. I had an event in my life and had the coping mechanisms to deal with the fear and the sadness. So I got put on many different forms of medication. And fast forward 2015, through the grace of God, I had a friend's son who's a doctor come into my life. And he said to me, much like the psychiatrist said to you, you don't have depression. You have fear, but you're not being treated for fear. You're being treated for depression. If I treat you for the fear, you won't have depression. So we rewound, and I spent a very painful 10 years of my life getting off all the prescription medication. And that's why I built the Hour of Champions, so I could teach people how to deal with fear.
get out. Well, first of all, good for you
Thank you.
that someone came into your life to break the difference down. You know what I'm
Yep.
saying? Because I Wayne Bill can attest to this. I decided years ago that as a result of the real estate market crashing, I don't believe that we have mental illness, but I definitely believe that we have real estate post traumatic stress syndrome. So, so
Undoubtedly.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
So
true.
when we look at the real estate market before the crash, we would come up with anything and try it. We were, oh God, we had no fear. We could anything, right? And as soon
Yep.
as the real estate market crashed, everyone became fearful. I
True.
mean, everyone, no one was, even now, I joke with Zeke Morris all the time. I said, you know what? I said, there's no shortage of money right now because we're all hoarding it because we've lost it, right?
Right.
So you don't see the fancy cars anymore. Very few people have upgraded their houses who
Very
lost
true.
everything, right? We
Yep.
drive in the same car, we living in the same house, and we hoarding the hell out of money. Like we do enough to kind of look like we back,
Right.
but we're hoarding money because of the fear of losing it all again, like we did when the real estate market shifted.
Right. The problem is that's not how we made it.
And
Right.
no, it's not,
Right.
because growth does not occur where there is comfort. So we have to come out of our comfort zone, but we're still living in what I consider real estate post traumatic stress syndrome from losing so much. And I mean, I joke, but this is the truth. There was a time that we had so much money that we were flamboyant with it and we were wasteful. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But I never was fed so much in my entire life.
Yeah.
Between the lobster omelet here, the shrimp lunch there, and the steak dinner here, and everybody was picking up a tab.
Right.
Everybody. And so now we're more realistic. We understand the possibilities of what can happen. So how do we push through can you give me a tip on how we can push through fear in 2019? Because it's a phenomenal time in real estate right now. What can one do to start that mind shift now that we understand that some people are being treated for mental illness when they've just had a life event, right?
Sure.
What are some of the things that we can do to be better in 2019 and get back on that relentless path of growth?
Right. Well, a beautiful way to articulate that story that you just did, as a matter of fact. And, I'm closing in on 60 years old. I hate to admit it.
Oh, it's okay.
But yeah, well, thank God I am, right? And I find myself, like I spent the missing component for my life was faith or spirituality. And that, I don't want to confuse that with religion. I did not grow up as a religious person. I think you did. But there is a great distinction between spirituality and religion,
Yes.
and they're both beautiful. Um, and going forward, you asked, like, how do we get past that fear? Well, what I learned the hard way was the opposite of fear is faith. And I struggled with faith, right? So I had to go back and I had to understand my story through the course of my life. I've had many struggles from the time that I was a young kid and my parents' marriage split up to the time when a career abruptly ended because of technology to a business, getting crushed. And there's never been a time where things didn't work out. They may not have worked out as perfectly as I wanted them to, but I'm here today. I'm 59 years old. I left my house at 4 o'clock in the morning. I went downtown and I worked out with the doctor that helped save my life in the year 2015. And so far, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And that's because I now have faith. So what I think that missing component is, I stress physical fitness because I think you don't go into war being unfit. And corny as it might sound, life is a war at many times. It throws some very, very tough things at you. So you need to be as physically fit as you can be to deal with life. You need to be mentally sound. And that means not learning how to not get overwhelmed with everything that's thrown at you and stay away from what I like to call rehearsing for disasters, right? Dreaming, tying an emotion, like worrying about something, tying an emotion to something that hasn't even happened yet, that will deplete your energy. And you need that energy to be able to combat what life throws at you. And then the last piece is, of course, the spirituality, having faith that things will work out and understanding that if you turn your life, and I believe this, over to what I like to call my higher power, some people call it the universe, some people call it God. There's a beautiful GPS system set up for you to get through life. The minute you get greedy or resentful, angry, or jealous, that universe turns that GPS system off and you're driving around with no roadmap. And imagine driving around or flying around through life with no roadmap. Sets us back to 2008, 2009. So I might have gotten long-winded there, but I believe in order to be the best version of yourself, to get through fearful, anxious moments, you've got to be conditioned mentally, physically, and spiritually. And that doesn't mean that life doesn't stop throwing stuff at you all the time, but you've got a much, much better chance of dealing with it because you're stronger in every aspect of your life.
Okay, so I'm seeing I need to work on a few things. And the mentally sound, I've always worked kind of
Yep.
on that. I tell people, when my parents were teen parents, and at one point they were both addicted to drugs, they mentally prepared me for how to deal with everything.
Yeah.
And I often thank them because their addiction to me saved me from so many future disasters. Living that, seeing that at a young age, one, I tell people you got to have coping skills. My parents were the greatest teacher of coping ability. Because I tell people I don't have any problems crying. I will cuss you completely out. And I feel better. I feel a sense of betterment. What I do know I need to work on is this physical fitness because these knees have worn my butt out. And I realized that over the Christmas holidays, I'm always in this office and I don't move because I'm catching up on my work. That's my annual catch up.
Yep.
And my knees start hurting probably day 2 because of inactivity. I said, "Oh, we got to shift this sucker around."
Yep.
And then you said it was one more. So physically fit, mentally sound. Did I forget something? Mental toughness
and spiritually conditioned.
and belief in things unseen is what I would often call it. However you want to, my mother said the faith of a mustard seed. when I think of, and my mother was a great teacher through her life. So she was a teen unwed mother, but my mother quit her job at ARA Services to start the Yellow Wagon concession stand in 1982. My mother was one of the first essentially food trucks. And she was able to, one, she didn't work November to almost April. She sent me to private school, and she would go take a trip to Europe or to South America for months at a time.
Yeah.
And she was living her best life. There were times that, let's say we didn't have the proper insurance. My mother would tell them, she would say, Marky, just hold, the park district would come out. They would pull up on the grass. I know we getting ready to get shut down. She says, just give me a few minutes. She'd tell them I had to go to the ladies' room. Somehow my mama would come back and she'd had this insurance, right? I don't know how she got the insurance or nothing, right? But she was always, I just remember things and incidents that occurred with her, and it was going to always work out because in her mind, that was the only possibility. There was no not work it out possibility. And when you see this, and you see it every single day, and you see someone quit their job, and you see them as an underdog, but you see them rise, it instills something in you. So I tell everybody, I had the greatest teachers. I had more than just my mom, but to be with my mom every single day and to see this relentlessness, this spirit, and she wasn't necessarily, she believed that there was a God, but she was spiritual. Mm-hmm. And she would tell you, Marky, my spirituality, she's like, it's abundant, because she was forever recreating, reinventing, doing things that people told her she did not have the ability to do. And she would just say, oh, watch. And she'd say, Marky, check this out. And she would put it to work. But she was relentless in it. No ifs, ands, buts. You weren't going to tell her, you know how people can get in your mind and tell you what's not going to happen. Even my own father told her, do not waste money sending Marky to private school. My mother was like, oh, my baby going to private school. You can go on and kick rocks. I don't care if you got a financial contribution to it or not. She going to go to that school right there. Then I tried to go to public high school, and she was like, you're going to Luther South. And I'm like, you don't want to stop spending your money? Because I said you was going to private school. And that was and she made it happen. So yeah, wow. I learned so much about you today. Like, I've always respected you, especially for your business acumen and the contributions you've made to actually helping other people fulfill their dreams through the possibility with purchase rehab, and then the possibilities of securing unsecurable properties, right? Yep. So you made a lot of things happen for a lot of people. I never understood that there was struggle and all the light that you were shining on the industry. You know what I'm saying? Because you made it look effortless.
Thank you.
I think that it's good for people to understand that they are not alone, that anything is possible, but that every leader has had some type of loss, whether they publicly talked about it at the time in which they were going through it.
That is for sure. That is for sure. And a lot, for some reason, people are nervous to talk about their loss. I never have been. I've been an open book, and it's helped me immensely in my healing process. And I try to use the attraction method, not the seduction method, in my life. I want people to follow me because they've heard my story, and they may find some similarities in there, and then they know that theirs is conquerable, if that's even a word. And I wanted to again make the distinction between the religious piece and the spiritual piece, because that was the last thing you were writing down. And for your viewers out there that are questioning whether they're spiritual or not, this may help them. So I like to say that religious people are trying to stay out of hell. Spiritual people have already been there. So if you just found out that you're spiritual, congratulations.
Look, I love the analogy.
Thank you.
Because guess what? I've already been there. So I will say, I'm trying to stay out. But I've already been there. I've experienced some of it for sure. Oh, my Lord. I love that. So in closing, how can people connect with you? Tell them about your group. I'm going to come back and redo the description to make sure that they can connect with you. Is it just for people in the world of real estate? Is it for entrepreneurs?
For everybody, worldwide. Everybody struggles. Everybody has fear. Everybody has sadness. The name of the group on Facebook is Hour of Champions. It's, again, derived from that hour that I put together in the middle of the night of incorporating physical fitness, mental toughness, and spirituality. That doesn't mean that you or anybody else has to get up at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning. Everybody's got their ability to create their own personal hour of champions, and everybody's a champion. Every single person has a champion within them, or as I like to say, a hero within them. Um, you can visit my website at hourofchampions.com. And in closing, I want to say that my book that I wrote in 2012, The Titan, is being relaunched this week as a workbook, a journal. So at the end of every chapter, there are a series of questions and assignments that I think will be terrific for entrepreneurs and high achievers who are looking to navigate through tough times in their life, and like to do the work, like to learn more about themselves and learn a little bit about my formula. I believe is imperative for success, and I'm happy to share it. So the Titan workbook will be back up on Amazon. There'll be a link on Hour of Champions, and I'll be promoting it all over the place.
Well, I'm glad I got you in because before your workbook hits the fact that you get to announce that the workbook is coming with the book, and you have the group in order to support it. And so I definitely see that your group is going to grow substantially, especially this year, because you're putting all the working components together in order to help people really be a champion. And so I thank you for
get people like you.
You get to, yeah. And I've learned so much.
You didn't think you were going to bring up the yellow car, and I wasn't going to bring up the real estate office on 51st Street.
But look, I remember the yellow car, right? And I surely thought that it was a Porsche. But now, you one thing that you pointed out, because a lot of times I talk about social selling, and what I would like to say is. Hold on, Austin, close the door. Oh, now we have a visitor, right? Okay. We have the big Y's in life. Come on over here so everybody gets to see you. Say good morning. Now climb back up under. I will say this. You said that you went through the Yellow Pay. You went through the Sun-Times and the Tribune.
Yes.
It's one thing, a lot of people cold call, but they don't build those long-term sustainable relationships. And so no matter what the marketing, this will be the marketing tip for the day, you have to build long-term sustainable relationships. We ended up on this call today because I think you sent me an inbox message on Facebook. Yep. I checked your group out. We had some conversation. We're both making shifts with our groups. Moving forward, we both embrace some of the same philosophies, but this is not a new relationship. This is almost a 20-year relationship. And when people show up for you and they provide value, you can always come back and rekindle that relationship because it was a good relationship. And so I think people, oftentimes they're just buying leads, but they don't do anything on facilitating that long-term sustainable relationship.
Well, as my friend Bill Jacobs, and I don't know if you may know Bill Jacobs, he's a financier, West Side Real Estate, but he taught me a few years ago to look at my phone and to understand the difference between contacts and relationships. And if somebody was a contact, to keep giving them a little sunshine and sprinkling them with a little water so they're always growing. So they're bragging about you while you're doing your podcast. Somebody on the other side of the city is bragging about you right now because you're great at keeping relationships. And conversely, contacts just sit in your phone and don't do anything. I encourage people to go through their database or their list and decide who's a contact, who's a relationship, and really, really get smart, continuing to grow. Because look, 20 years later, we're able to sit on a wonderful little, Monday morning interview here, and you mean the world to me, Marky. You really do. This is super special.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. You have absolutely made my day. You're going to come up in conversation later today. So if your ears are ringing, know that I'm talking about you, because I've learned some other lessons today, and I never knew how you ended up in my office that day. But now I know.
Thank you.